arrive in Vietnam in 1966, and where did you arrive in the country?
Came into Da Nang, and then I joined a unit in the First Marine Regiment, which was almost all south of Da Nang, from the coast to the mountains. Three
Sort of that.
battalions.
Is Hoi An part of that?
Hoi An was down south, was south of where we were. Yes, Hoi An was a part of, actually, I mean, in the 5th Marines area.
Okay. So then for folks who know that area, then it sounds like between Marble Mountain and Hoi An is where you were in that area,
Yeah.
between those.
We were in 2nd Battalion, 1st Marine Police, so there was another battalion between us and the coast, and then we were there, and then 3rd Battalion was someplace else.
I see.
Of the regiment. So I joined 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, was assigned to Echo Company, E Company, and picked up the 2nd Platoon as a platoon leader, platoon commander.
When you were flying into Vietnam, when you were on your way to Vietnam, before you first felt the air of Vietnam, smelt the smells of Vietnam, you're still in the air, so you're still kind of in an American bubble. What did Vietnam mean to you at that time?
It meant the place I was going to go to work. I knew somewhat what was going on. You can't know it till you're there. I felt trained. I felt ready to go get to work at it. So
in your mind, did that work, was that work you had in your mind consciously related to a global struggle against communism? Was that work primarily, my work for the next 13 months is to get myself and as many of my guys home alive as possible, and that's what the work is, a combination of the two? What was the meaning about?
Sort of a combination of the two. I didn't have as strong a feeling then as I do now about the struggle against communism. That was part of it. That was just part of the background of everything, I think.
And so you just indicated that your feelings now are different when you think about the struggle against communism. How so?
Well, I think it's real. More so than then. It was something I heard about on the news or read about in the magazines and papers. But no, I see it's real.
So is that your perspective then, that when you look back on the Vietnam War, a lot of times vets will look back at the Vietnam War and say, that whole communism domino theory thing, they question that. Is your perspective that you look back and say, no, I mean, the Vietnam War really was about a global struggle against communism?
For the most part, I avoid conversations like that. This reason, the people that were there at the behest of their government to do a job that they were assigned, and to do it to the best of their ability, something that would support our national interest. Those people were poorly treated because of their service. And my interests have been, and my concern has been mostly that those people become more central to that conflict, to recognize the recognition of their contribution to that. And so I find that trying to decide whether we won the war or lost the war, whether it was a good idea, bad idea, that whether dominoes were really involved or not, is a fruitless argument, or something that's, no offense, but something that's just an academic discussion. So I just avoid those kind of discussions and concentrate on the people.
So for you, the important thing really is for Americans and others to recognize, however they feel about these questions and questions like them, to um, acknowledge and recognize the work of those who are involved in this project, because their country either drafted them to do it or they
Right.
volunteered. But in either case, even if they were drafted, they had the capacity not to go along. And we know that a number did go to Canada and avoided the draft in other ways. So you're saying, however folks think about these questions, what's important is recognizing the service of those who did go.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the way that folks who served in Vietnam were mistreated. I think that's the word you used.
Yes.
Now, you graduated from the University of Arkansas, if I remember right, in 1966.
Yes. Commissioned January 27th, 1966.
So commissioned in the Marine Corps in January 66, the University of Arkansas. We don't think of Arkansas as a hotbed of protest. What was your own experience as a person on his way to gaining a commission in the Marine Corps in 1966, by which time it's not 68, 69, but things are warming up in 66. Did you have any of those kinds of experiences yourself on campus?
No, I came to the University of Arkansas from College of the Ozarks as a junior college in Branson, Missouri. A quick detour here. I would have started Little Rock Central in 1958 when Faubus closed the school.
Hmm.
My dad presented me with an opportunity to go to school at a real school. So he and my next door neighbor, they took us up to the School of the Ozarks at Point Lookout near Branson, and presented us as refugees and got us in. My dad was a salesman.
Refugees from Little Rock?
Yeah. So I stayed 3 years in high school there at the School of the Ozarks, and then went to junior college at School of the Ozarks, won scholarship down at the University of Arkansas. So went to the university. That's how I got to the University of Arkansas. I was studying botany. I had always wanted to be a Marine. In my neighborhood when I grew up, we may have played Cowboys and Indians when I was really young, but most of the time we played Army. We all the boys in the neighborhood we'd choose up sides and then maneuver and engage one another. I'd always wanted to be a Marine, so when it came time to take an actual step, I joined the Marine Corps and the Platoon leaders class, which was a way of getting in the Marine Corps from 2 6-week training, one right after you joined it up, and then one right before you would graduate. And then when you graduated, you were commissioned. So I had been to one 6 weeks training before I went to the University of Arkansas, and then I didn't notice anything. I avoided the ROTC route at the university. There was an Air Force and an Army.
Yeah.
And then I didn't notice any. I was in a lab with a bunch of graduate students at one point, and one of them asked me, "What are you going to do when you graduate?" So I'm going in the Marine Corps, and he was working along on his project, and he just mused, "Oh yeah, there's a big marine biology lab out somewhere east." You know, he was serious. He didn't have a clue what it was or what I'd said.
Oh, marine biology.
Yeah, marine biology. I just let it pass, and we went on.
No point in plumbing the depths of that discussion.
Yeah, that's right. So there, as far as I remember, and I just had my head in my major. As far as I remember, there's no anti-war effort at all, movement at all. So
yeah. So in what year did your formal relationship with the Marine Corps begin? You said as a kid you always wanted to do that, but
63. I joined in 63 when I Before the Christmas before I graduated from junior college.
So 63, the formal relationship with the Marine Corps begins. 66, you are
Commissioned.
commissioned.
Yeah.
63, Vietnam is something not a lot of people are paying attention to. 66, now it's more and more on the front page. Did that make any difference to you in terms of level of commitment to the Marine Corps?
No, no.
Okay. And
I
as
had, go ahead.
well, and as you know, as your relationship with the Marine Corps goes on and the situation in Vietnam warms up, does that figure in your mind in the sense that, okay, I'm going to be an officer in the Marine Corps. Clearly, there's a conflict that's growing in Southeast Asia. There's a really good chance that as an officer in the Marine Corps, I'm going to be getting involved in that conflict. Was that something that was in your mind at that time?
Not particularly. It was a sort of a foregone conclusion,
Yeah.
but it wasn't worrying at that time. I didn't know much.
What was it about the Marine Corps that was so compelling?
Well, I don't know. Excellence, stories, movies, red stripe down the blue trousers, dress blues. I don't, it's a whole combination of things.
Well, you sent me a photo of you in your dress white uniform,
Yes,
and
yeah.
I was immediately reminded of why, when I was on the USS Ranger as a sailor, we were all so envious of the Marines aboard, partly because they were all tougher than we were and everybody knew it, but also because their uniforms were awesome compared to the humiliating stuff they made us wear. So there's no question that the Marine, whoever designs these Marine Corps uniforms has done an outstanding job. No question about it. Let's get you back on that plane to Vietnam. And now, for the very first second in what's going to be a 13-month tour, you are feeling the air of Vietnam. You're smelling the smells of Vietnam. What is your very first memory of
Smell.
being in this very different country?
The smell of the Orient. The smell of the Orient. That's the very first memory. As soon as that door opened on the plane and that air flooded in, that was a big notice.
Yeah. Of course, as you're flying to Vietnam, that you're heading to a war zone. You know this. It is an abstraction, though. At some point, it becomes real and very concrete. What was the thing that happened, the thing you saw, the thing you heard, the thing you experienced that made concrete what had been an abstraction? You're going to a war zone, but now you really, really know because of something you've seen, heard, experienced. What was that very first thing that drove that point home to you?
Probably arriving at battalion headquarters, right at the battalion area.
Yeah.
That's when I really saw active Marines, who had been directly involved in combat. There was nothing going on particularly that day in that area, but it was just, the other places were all regimental headquarters and all that were more just cantonment areas and nothing particularly special about them. But by the time we got to the battalion, that seemed to be, this is real. So
how did that go? It's always, when you're the new guy going into any new circumstance, there's almost inevitably some, an awkwardness, a feeling out period. But here you're the officer, and now you are in command of guys who I imagine, have seen combat. Some of them have probably seen a fair amount of it.
Yeah.
And now you're supposed to be in charge of them. This has got to be a real challenge for a young junior officer. How did that go?
I had a great platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Bathurst. I think I sent you a picture of us together. They're coming back after an operation. I couldn't have had a better young officer. Couldn't have had a better staff NCO as a platoon sergeant. He later retired from the Marine Corps as a full colonel.
Oh, really?
Yes, really a good leader. The I that was one of being a platoon leader was one of the jobs, one of the few jobs I've ever done in my life where I felt like, at least when I got there, I felt like I was trained to do. Now, it wasn't. There were things that were lacking in that training that were learned fairly quickly, but it was. I felt confident that I had, that I was in the right place. I had to learn a lot. The first patrol we went on, Bathurst led. I went with everybody, but he led the patrol. After that, I led all the patrols. So
What are the characteristics? You're touching on something, and you mentioned, ROTC at UA, University of Arkansas, and I've actually, had meetings with some of the cadets over there. And as a junior enlisted guy, I shared stories with them about, things that happen with young officers and good decisions young officers made, and other things young officers did that didn't work so well. But those cadets often hear that when you're a second lieutenant, first lieutenant, you really do need to rely on your senior enlisted guys, especially early on. Sounds like you're saying that that's the case.
that's absolutely the case.
What were the characteristics that Bathurst had that made him a great leader in that context? Even, that at the outset, he's in charge of this patrol, and you're very quickly learning. But what were the characteristics, the assets he had that made him a great leader in a combat situation?
In the vernacular of the time, he was tactically and technically proficient. He knew tactics. He had been there. He knew the ground as well. He was decisive. He was clear-headed, clear-thinking in pressure situations. He had the mission primarily in mind, but he never forgot the troops. Those kind of characteristics.
Yeah. And were the two of you, he was there earlier, so I imagine he rotated out before you did, but were you together most of the time?
We were together for several months. Then there was a vacancy in third platoon where we didn't have an officer to fill it. He went to be the leader in third platoon. Later on, toward the end of his tour, when we got some replacements in for new lieutenants in, he took over weapons platoon and then rotated home from there.
How many Marines would be in a platoon?
Should be 48, but there were times when we had much less than that.
Yeah.
Should have most of the time we had much less than that. At that time we were, there was replacements would come in one at a time or a group at a time. The unit went over as a unit initially. Then there was they had to, so that not everybody rotated out at the same time. They started moving people around from one company to another, from one battalion to another, so that you would so that you would have a graduated attrition of rotations. So we had people that had initially come in from one battalion and then we'd transferred over to us to finish out their tour, because to make all the rotation tour dates even out.
You said that a lot of the time the platoon was not at full strength.
Yeah.
Is that primarily because of this rotation process? A Marine is in country for 13 months. Is it primarily because of casualties? Is it a mix of those two?
Mix of those two, more so attrition from casualties, I think. But then there were periods of time when we just got no replacements. The replacements went other places that they were apparently needed more.
Yeah.
We had at one time, I think we were, well, we were down below, the whole company was down below our strength that we were supposed to be. If we got below a certain strength, we weren't supposed to be on the field at all. But we went for extended periods of time at that level where we were not much more than a platoon and a half. So.
Did you ever wonder about that? I mean, we've got a big country, and we've got a lot of kids. You had been at TUA, one of whom didn't know the difference between marine biology and the Marine Corps, apparently. Did that ever pass through your mind? It's not like the United States lacks young men, but for some reason we're not able to keep our platoon up to full strength here. Did that ever occur to you? Like, what's going on? Why are we here and so many aren't?
Not at the time. I was focused on the job at hand, getting the job done with the assets ahead. But it was, not then. Later on in my career, when I was on recruiting duty, it was a big deal, but not then.
Yeah. You mentioned casualties, and I asked before we began recording if there were any, Marines who did not survive the war that you wanted to, that you would like us to remember. And I'm sure that there are more than these three, but you name these three. And one you name is Lance Corporal Eugene Pike.
Yes, he was the first man I lost.
Right, and I wanted to ask you about that, just even that phrase you used, and here I'm getting at, I've been very interested lately, and it's coming up in most of the conversations I'm having lately, is the idea of picking up on that famous novel from the Vietnam War, The Things They Carry. And here I'm thinking particularly of the things a young junior combat officer carries. And I noticed this phrase when you wrote a little bit about Lance Corporal Pike, and you said he was, quote, the first man I lost. And there's that first personal pronoun, I lost. And is that something that, am I reading too much into that, in the sense that it's not just a sense of the platoon lost this guy, but are you saying, and I don't want to be too literal in my reading, but is there that sense of I as the leader?
Yeah, it was personal.
Lost?
It was personal.
Yeah.
The platoon lost a good man. Marine Corps lost a good man. America lost a good man. But it was personal. There were times when I wondered whether or not the decision I made that put us into that location, should I made a different decision. There were to make that even more personal for me is I walked the same trail he walked, where he stepped out of his position and stepped on the booby track. I walked that same trail when we moved into that area during the evening, during the late night and early morning. I walked that same path. He's the one that stepped on the mine.
You walked that path before.
Yeah, yeah. At that, when we moved into that location, when they set in a position, and then later when I checked lines. So
And so is part of that then the sense that, you say you kind of, or you suggested you kind of replay the tape and, should I have done this? Should I have done that? And um, is that the tape you play that as you're walking this trail, I should have seen this, I should have seen that, I should have looked out for this? Is that how that goes as you play it out in your mind, or?
No, I felt responsible for everybody. I'm responsible for what they do or didn't do. I'm responsible for our accomplishment of mission and their welfare. It's just, he was the first one, I lost several after that. And they're all somewhat personal. That was the first one. So it's not, I don't think it's remorse for, it's not something I live with daily. I've run into those guys who can't get past that. It's just, I did what I resolved it in my mind anyway, that I did the best I could for everybody there, and it still happened. So.
I'm looking at this photo, which really is a great photo, from October '66. And here you're getting ready to go out. What particular memories do you have about this specific operation? What was this operation about?
I don't recall. It was just something. It was
Just one of
just the beginning, one of dozens and dozens yet to come. So.
Yeah. In the photo, you've got, the face you can see the best is the one of the corpsman. And is it Kehoe? Is that how you pronounce that name?
Kehoe, yeah, Kehoe.
Kehoe.
Yeah, he lives in California now.
And Marines often speak of their corpsman. What are your own memories about the Navy corpsman that you worked with in Vietnam?
Some of the best people in the world. Another one who replaced Kehoe was Doc Weed, tall, skinny guy from Chicago. He and I have stayed in contact. Well, we were both campers unit at the same time. I had him over to the house for dinner one holiday as well before I deployed from there again. But we've stayed in contact since then. The company, we've been getting back together for the last almost 10 years now, and then a lot of these guys come back to that reunion, that gathering. The guy who's to my left, Bachman, has come back there. Newell, the guy to my right, the machine gun leader, just passed away in January. He's come back there. Kehoe has come back most of the time. Benavides has come back from there most of the time, and Gilchrist has come back from at times. All these guys have gone on to do been productive citizens of the U.S. That's kind of an understatement, because some of them have achieved really great things. Yeah.
When I was in the Navy, the Marines we had, I spoke earlier of our grudging respect for them and their uniforms. And we also knew that they looked at us with a degree of well-deserved contempt. But did you consider the Navy corpsmen sort of honorary Marines?
Yes, they wore a Marine uniform as well. Let me give you an example. We at one of our gatherings, there was a man who came back to the gathering who had functioned as a sniper for us. He had walked point for us quite a bit. When he got to the hotel, I met him talking to him. He said, there was this guy, he said, I can't remember his name exactly for sure. But he said, I thought he was the bravest guy around. Now, this is the guy who walks point. He said, I thought he was the bravest guy around. And we talked a little bit. He said, he was one of the corpsmen. He said, he was describing, I said, it must be Keyhole. And he said, yeah, that was it. He thought he had such respect for that corpsman because when someone was wounded or needed him, they got up and moved. They got up and did their job regardless of what was going on around them. That's an amazing characteristic, amazing trait.
Yeah. You said that, or you just mentioned briefly a few minutes ago that your Marines went out on, dozens of patrols. What, I imagine there were patrols that had specific missions. What generally were the purpose of these patrols? What was the mission, generally speaking, for these many patrols?
We were south of Da Nang, an area that had wasn't that was primarily infiltrated by Viet Cong. Our mission generally was to deny them access, to engage them and deny them access to the area. So we were looking for them and to eliminate them as best we could. Now, we encountered some NVA in that area, not very often in that area. We encountered NVA when we went off on operations in other areas, but mostly it was Viet Cong in that area.
As a well-trained Marine officer, and then as time goes on, you acquire combat experience. What is now your assessment of the Viet Cong as an adversary, as a fighting force?
The ones that we encountered were wily. They knew the area better than we did. However, they were set in their ways. They found a pattern that worked for them, and when we discovered the pattern, we eliminated them. So we knew that we got to where we could recognize in this one area who it was that had set the booby trap that we found. And we knew not by name or by face, but we knew that it was because he had the same characteristics of others that were in that, so they worked that particular area. So we figured out how they worked, and then we set a trap for them. Sometimes successful, sometimes not so successful, but more often successful. We still lost too many people. Too many people had to leave the field because of that. Wounded, someone killed.
Of the dozens of patrols you went on, I wouldn't expect that you would have a specific number, but just sort of estimating, how many of those patrols would you say there was some sort of direct confrontation with the enemy? Or like what percentage?
Oh, it's hard to say. It was we got shot at every time.
Wow.
We encountered mines and booby traps every time.
Wow.
I don't know if you count that as a direct. It wasn't necessarily a firefight every time, but we got sniped at every time. So.
Jeez. What was the process for you? I mean, I don't imagine you ever get to a place where there's not tension and that sort of thing. But I'm interested in how things unfolded for you. was it something like this? And then I'm interested in hearing your response. Before you go out on your first patrol, I imagine a fair degree of, I don't know if anxiety is the right word, but tension, concern. Maybe what you know is going to be very last patrol, the same thing, because there's always that sense of this is the last one and I really want to get through this one. And then you have all of these dozens in the middle. Is there ever a place in that middle section where it almost does become, I don't know what the right word is, not something where there isn't the sense of tension? If you get what I'm saying, I'm just interested in that process of first patrol, last patrol, and the many dozens in between. As you look back on sort of how you as an individual sort of confronted all of this from beginning to end.
It becomes familiar in the middle because of the experience that you built up. It doesn't, for me, it didn't become routine to the place where I could relax. That was dangerous. The troops all had a concern for people who just got there. They were dangerous because they didn't know enough yet, and they were concerned about people, staying away from people who were just about to rotate home, because sometimes they got too careful and were also dangerous to them. So for me, it was familiar, but it wasn't. There wasn't a just another walk in the park.
Yeah.
We said that, but it wasn't. So.
Was that last patrol for you, one that was particularly stressful? Because there is that sense, you read, for example, I'm thinking of a Civil War diary where you hear of guys who are hit the day before Lee's surrender, and all of it's tragic, but there's something about that seems especially awful. And was that kind of how it was for you? This is your last one, you've got to do your job, but man, I really want to make sure that I get out of this one in one piece.
Well, for me, it was, I think I sent you a name also of Williams. Name is somebody that I wanted to specifically remember.
Rufus Timothy Williams.
Yes, we'd started off on Operation Calhoun. It was a battalion size. For us, it was a battalion sized operation. We were company was point for the battalion. Movement through unfamiliar terrain, territory of about 6 miles, to where we moved up to a place, and then we'd do a right flank and move up on some hills. I was with 3rd Platoon on that operation, and 3rd Platoon was point for the company, so we were point for the whole battalion. And Rufus was up there on the front. We were just short of our objective before we would turn and make a right flank and go up a hill to our right. When we got ambushed, Rufus was killed. 2 other guys right behind him were wounded badly, and then I was behind him, the squad leader that was right in front of me. about an hour or so later, during that movement up the hill for the platoon, my radio and our operator and I got hit by rifle fire and were evacuated. So I didn't have a chance to think about the last thing. I got hit and taken off the field. My wound wasn't one that would take me out of country, but it took a long time to heal up. It got infected. So I was dead weight in the rifle company. I was functioning as the XO, but I was still dead weight. I moved from there to took over the S4 position, the logistics officer position for the battalion. So I didn't get to think about my last patrol, as some people do.
Was it rifle fire or shrapnel from a mine, or what?
It was rifle fire. I've talked to some of the other guys that were there with me, and we debated about how many rounds were fired. But we were walking up this bare hill, and I turned around to reach for the handset for my radio operator. So he'd extended the handset out to me, and I was reaching back to get it. There were at least 2 rounds fired, because one went through the tricep of his extended arm, and the other one of the other rounds hit a rock and ricocheted off, grazed my right calf, but embedded some bullet jacket in my left ankle. So it wasn't. I don't have any effects from it now. It wasn't as serious as a lot of the wounds, but it just wouldn't heal up in the tropical climate. So couldn't wear a boot, couldn't go to the field. When I got to the S4 shop, the clerks in there had put a sign on the door. I said, because I was still wearing a shower shoe on that foot, and they had a sign on the door that said, "We hire the handicapped." So,
What was the I'm always interested in the psychology of these things. So you've already lost a Marine, Rufus. 2 other Marines have been wounded, and now your radio man is wounded, and now you're wounded. And it turns out,
it just ticked me off to no end.
what do you mean by that?
I was angry. It just, this was about 9 months that I'd been in country and hadn't been hit. There were 11 of us from my basic class that got into country on about the same day. I was, I think, the last one to get hit or killed.
Oh, jeez.
Wow. And so I didn't really realize all that until later. But it just, I had no right to be angry. Everybody else was getting injured as well, or others were getting injured as well. But it just really bugged me, just made me angry.
Is that because I'm interested in why there's anger, because an alternative response is, this is the $1 million wound that gets me out of this situation. What is it that
I wasn't going to leave the field. I was not fixing to leave. The company commander got on the line and said, said, "This is a direct order. You will be evacuated."
And is this what's underlying your response? Is it a commitment to the guys you're with, and I don't want to leave them?
That and the mission partly.
It comes time now to go home after 13 months. I guess you've been out of the field for several months. So at that point, was the sense, okay, I've done my 13 months? We haven't mentioned it. Well, you did mention that you're married this whole time. I think you see your wife on R&R, but apart from that, you've been apart for more than well over 12 months. At that time, were you eager to get out, or were you eager to leave Vietnam at the end of your tour?
I, of course, but I don't know. I wasn't eager enough to stay that I would extend. I wanted to get home to my wife, and to get on with the next thing. I figured I'd be back. I didn't. It didn't turn out that way. But 13 months was 13 months. That was the agreed. That was it was my time to go do something else. So I was going to go do something else.
As you look back on all of this, this really broad and deep experience you had of the war in different ways, what does it all mean to you now as you look back on it in retrospect after several decades have passed?
Could I have an easier question?
Yeah.
I don't know. One of now I stayed in the Marine Corps. So I didn't have some of the same experiences that others had that came in, that served and got out and went and tried to go on with their lives. It informed. It wasn't something that was talked about all the time, but it informed all your decisions. I'm glad that I had the opportunity. The best assignment I had in the Marine Corps was in 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines. Being there with the men of Echo Company was the best assignment I'd ever had.
That's the work early on there south of Da Nang in Vietnam.
I'm glad I got the opportunity to do the casualty notification work. I think I did that well. And it was difficult, but it was a rewarding experience as well. So
when you say that, now how long did you stay in the Marine Corps?
20 years, 5 months, and 2 days.
Oh goodness, so I didn't know. I didn't know this. I didn't know that you were a career Marine.
Yeah.
So as you're going through your career as a Marine, you said that the Vietnam experience informed the decisions you made as your career unfolded. How so?
It informed how you trained. It informed the decisions about when you had the ability to make decisions about force structure or about weapons and viewpoints, and how you viewed the world, how you viewed the Marines, how you viewed NCOs, everything. It just informed everything. Some of the things you said, it wasn't like, well, we'll do it this way because we did it that way in Vietnam. That's not what I'm saying. It was because of those experiences, you learned certain things worked, certain things didn't. You wanted outcomes that were in many cases different than what you had then. So you learned and you practiced how to get a better or how to get a different outcome. So I had several different types of duty while I was on active duty, but it seemed like all of that just you made decisions on the basis of my family heard me say a lot of times, they say, well, this isn't the way home. I said, well, we always take a different route on the way back home because you don't know, they maybe have an ambush for you. They saw how we went out. They may be trying to ambush us on the way back. It just
Yeah.
it just a lot. There's just a lot of baggage in that comment about informing all your decisions.